Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Right now in a Black Ops 7, you're of course probably starting out and leveling up a bunch of different weapons, testing out which ones you are enjoying the most and which ones feel right to you. But today I wanted to go through and give you guys a couple of early game recommendations for the top 5 best weapons you want to be using. I've gone through, I have max leveled a handful of guns, already looked at a bunch of different weapon stats, and been testing out a ton of stuff since the game launched. So we got some pretty strong, some pretty solid choices here to start things off for the year. So first up here, we've got the MXR-17. This thing kind of feels like the Scar or like the Rampart from previous COD games, and it is an absolute beast. This thing hits like a truck. It's got one of the best damage profiles in the game. Clean iron sights, as you guys can see here with this overall build. This is one of my favorite rifles in the game just because of how strong it is. Whether you're fighting at 20 meters, 40 meters, 50 meters, it can play some mid-range, it can play some long range as well. It's got a little bit of a slower fire rate, so that close range is going to maybe be a little bit less ideal because it is a mid or long range rifle, but this thing is incredibly powerful and a ton of fun to use. So currently I've been mostly just messing with 5 attachment setups. Of course, you can always go through and use the gunfighter wildcard to get 8 attachments, but on a gun like the MXR-17 here, for example, an optic I don't really feel like is super necessary. Some people might prefer an ELO or a 2x or a 3x, and if that's you, that's fine. But to me, those iron sights, especially when you go through and you adjust the barrel, are so clean and really easy to stay on target with, even over some longer distances. So instead, first up, I do opt for a muzzle, just the basic compensator here, the Redwell 90. Gonna help out with vertical recoil control. This thing does have a decent bit of kick, so anytime you can help out the recoil and make this thing even easier to use, that's going to be an outright win. So I do rock that first and foremost on here. We got the long barrel on here as well. With this, it's only going to impact the damage range. For what it's worth, you could also probably rock the hybrid barrel if you're looking for a little bit better balance between velocity and range. With this, you do have a 936 velocity, but the first max damage range is only going to be 39 meters as opposed to 45. The mid-range caps out at 70 with the long barrel as opposed to just 61 with the hybrid. So you get that second best TTK, that second best damage profile, all the way up to 70 meters with the long barrel, which basically covers the vast majority of the engagements you're going to get into there. I do also go for the lateral precision grip, which is the horizontal recoil under barrel in this case. Again, decent bit of recoil here, so you want to attack that as much as possible where you can, hence why I'm rocking this. Makes the gun a lot more predictable and easy to use. You do have a slightly slower rate of fire here, so I do go for the basic magazine. Don't really feel like there's a huge need to go through and upgrade that. The prestige attachment here is going to be a fast mag. You only get 10 rounds and it turns it into semi-auto, so that's more of like a niche option there for sure. Don't really feel the need for a rear grip. If I were to go for one here with gunfighter, for example, I'd probably just go for the quick draw one, helping out that ADS speed. I've also got the winch stock on here, helping out even more with horizontal and vertical recoil control, so the gun's going to be even easier to use. And lastly, I do go for the recoil sync unit, or the recoil springs, basically for even more free recoil control. For what it's worth, if you are rocking just the long barrel and you're not a fan of that 780 velocity, I feel like that's sufficient on the vast majority of maps in this game, but you might be looking for a higher velocity option. You could switch out recoil springs for overpressured if you wanted and end up with a 936, which would be pretty solid there. But yeah, this thing is a beast. And of course, if you want to import this exact setup or any of the setups that we're talking about here today into your game right away, just be mindful of that build code right above the optic and the muzzle attachments there. You can copy that code and it'll actually end up giving you this exact setup if you've got all the attachments unlocked. Next up here, we've got the AK-27. This is actually the very first gun that I started leveling here in Black Ops 7. This thing also hits like a truck, and it's really consistent just across the board. It's not going to be the craziest up close option, again, because it is a rifle here, but when you get into the long range, it basically feels like there's no strong damage drop off. The mid range to the long range is going to be insanely consistent here. I find it to be relatively easy to use as well. This thing, another pick that really stands out early game in my opinion. So here, while the irons are clean, I found myself to be a lot more accurate using the Lethal Tools ELO, which I believe you unlock for getting the Peacekeeper to level 5 for what it's worth. But this is a really clean ELO sight. It's one of my favorite optics in the game, and definitely one that I'm going to be spamming on a ton of weapons this year. So that's certainly one to keep an eye on in my opinion. I do also go for the compensator, in this case the EMT3 compensator, helping out with that vertical recoil control, making the gun a little bit easier to use. I do go for the bullet velocity barrel in this case. We got a 931 velocity. It just feels like it was hitting with this. The TTK is already so good in the mid-range and the long range. Didn't necessarily feel the need to have to use a long barrel in this case to extend out those damage ranges. But again, a hybrid barrel could also be very practical here and viable as well if you're looking for a little bit of a balance between range and velocity. You still get an 815 with the hybrid on there. So between those three, you really can't go wrong with any of those. I also use the Flow Guard foregrip, which helps out a little bit with horizontal control, but also gives you some better movement speed and sprinting movement speed. Just makes this a tad bit more aggressive. Obviously, multiplayer gameplay is so hectic. This is going to make life a little bit easier there as far as overall running and gunning goes. And then lastly, I did go for the recoil springs yet again for that free recoil control. There's also the prestige attachment though, the enhanced cycle system, which ups the fire rate and gives you a ton of horizontal control, but actually hurts the damage range and the velocity a tad bit. But throw this on there and this could be a seriously good option too. That's certainly a prestige attachment I'm keeping my eye on. But yeah, this again is a really strong rifle here. Build code on the screen in the bottom left if you're interested in copying this one-to-one. And by the way, as we are breaking down all the weapons, all the setups here today, if you guys enjoy the video, you find this information helpful, do me a favor, drop a like on it. It's always seriously appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, you want to ensure you are always in the know for everything going on in Call of Duty, this is the place to be. So feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. Next up here, we've got the RK9 and SMG. And for the most part, I won't lie, SMGs in this game do feel a little bit underwhelming. They're not that crazy and they certainly have their role. As you can see, when you get out into the mid-range there, this is not a gun that's going to absolutely fry over range. These are meant for the close range, and the RK9 is one that especially stands out. First SMG is a little bit interesting, but on paper, it's got the fastest TTK in the category, and in execution, once you level this thing up and you get used to the overall feel of it, it's very rewarding. So here I've kind of gone back and forth with whether or not I want an optic. I ended up using the Lethal Tools ELO for a while here. I did like the feel of it quite a bit. The irons really aren't that bad though. They kind of remind me of like the Shicom or the Chicom from Black Ops 2, the burst SMG that we had back then. Really clean irons, but also I'm very accurate using the ELO sight on here too. So I think that's sort of a preference thing if you want an optic or not at the end of the day. I did go for the Hawker Series 45 compensator for the vertical recoil. Makes this thing a tad bit more accurate, of course. I ended up going for the long barrel. This is what I'll be using on basically every single SMG, extending out those damage ranges. The effective damage range here of just about 11 meters, and then 11 to 23 being the mid-range is pretty practical and pretty solid as well for an SMG like this. So it does feel pretty good out to about 30 meters or so, really. I also got the quick step foregrip on here for movement speed, strafe speed, and some hip fire movement speed. This thing doesn't have a ton of recoil control, so I really did enjoy the feel of this one. Also the MFS Iron Lung hand stop, giving you better fire rate and control, but removing the auto burst could be pretty crazy as well if you're able to, you know, stay consistent with your shots on target. So that's a prestige attachment to keep an eye on. Then Lotus Draw Grip on here for the faster ADS, just making this thing a little bit more aggressive. If I were to drop an optic and use iron sights instead, I'd probably end up throwing on a mobility stock like Nightfall, for instance, or the Elantra Step for a better strafe speed, which is going to feel really solid as well. So a few things you could tweak here where you see fit. But yeah, the RK9, one of the few SMGs that really feels like it stands out right now. Following that, we've got the M15 Mod 0. This is basically the very first gun you get in the game, and it's probably the one you've seen the most in the feed, maybe in your hands as well. It's a really strong first rifle. Now on paper, its TTK, especially in the mid-range and the close range, is not going to be that crazy. It does really keep up over long range effectively as well, but the thing that this rifle has going for it is how easy it is to use and how aggressive it is as well. This is like really a fast run and gun in your face style rifle that is incredibly efficient, easy to use, and versatile at the same time. It's doing all the right things. So here, this is a gun that you could really use with 5 attachments or 8 attachments if you wanted to, quite frankly. If you're going for 8 attachments, throw on whatever optic you're comfortable with here. I do like the Redwell compensator, vertical control, very basic, very straightforward, but it gets the job done. It makes the gun easier to use, of course. I like the Bowen Watchtower barrel on here for the better damage range. We've got a 38 meter effective damage range there, which is really generous, especially for multiplayer gameplay. The second range goes all the way out to 64 meters as well, which is really solid. The iron hold angled underbarrel helping out with some sway, so it's going to be laser accurate there. A little bit of horizontal recoil control. Just felt really solid and consistent here, quite frankly. The basic horizontal control grip would also be decent here, though, with the axis shift as well, if you're just looking for the horizontal recoil control. If you're using 8 attachments, you could absolutely go for an extended mag here, maybe even a flip mag if you wanted to for a faster reload. Either or would work fine there. Rear grip, probably go for the Peregrine grip here with the faster ADS. I personally love the Wanderer 3V stock for the better strafe. It feels so good on this gun in particular with how aggressive it already is. Then lastly, buffer springs on here, the recoil springs for that free recoil control. This thing's going to be even more of a laser beam and definitely the most spammed weapon so far, but for good reason. The thing is real nice. And then lastly here, the VS Recon, our sniper. This thing is a beast. It really feels like you don't get hit markers with this thing. It's also really not that slow. I said no hit markers, and of course I got a hit marker because I didn't get the headshot, but this thing is so fun, and really it just feels like you're gonna fry everybody with this thing. If you got your sights on target, if you're good at quick scoping, if you can hold the angles well, and you're nice to that reaction time, that flick as somebody's turning a corner or peeking their head up, they stand no chance when going up against this thing. And the best part about this is you hardly have to level this thing to get the ideal setup. Now you can prestige it and have it be really ideal, but even just as a low level option here, I'm only level 10 and I've got a setup that I love. I am using the default optic on this blueprint here, the ballistic scythe one, which I was fine with. That scope worked well for me. I go for the short barrel here. This helps out ADS speed, your jumping ADS speed as well. It's not hurting anything though, so your range, your velocity, none of that takes a hit there. And you've got a 756 velocity, which is sufficient for multiplayer for sure, and this thing's gonna one-shot at so many different ranges. It feels like it's so strong, so consistent there. The underbarrel here, better idle sway with the Stedig, I believe that's how you pronounce that. The better idle sway is huge, the idle sway delay improvement as well, so it's just gonna be easier to stay on target with this thing essentially. I go for the R1 shelf rear grip for a better ADS. Now keep in mind, this does hurt your flinch a little bit, so that's why I actually use the stable heavy pad stock, which has the better flinch resistance. That way you can still stand a chance in a gunfight if somebody is firing back and actually hitting you. Lastly on here, for the time being, I've got the light bolt just for the faster rechamber, the slightly better fire rate. Keep in mind, this does hurt your velocity a little bit. Again, though, 756 or whatever it was, yeah, 756 is fine for multiplayer. That's not going to be a huge red flag. That said, if you were to go through and prestige it, this thing can also be pretty solid, because the underbarrel that you end up getting here is the MFSR stop, which actually helps out with rechamber stabilization, ADS speed as well, and you also have recoil and sway control when holding your breath a little bit more, and you can hold your breath for longer, so that can be a really strong attachment too once you go through and you max level this and prestige it one time there. So keep that in mind as well as you are leveling this thing up. But these are 5 weapons you get pretty early on into the game, all of them feeling fantastic right now. Of course, we're going to end up seeing various different weapon updates, buffs, nerfs, adjustments of that nature. So as we see things evolve, we'll be covering even more best loadouts, best class setups here, and breaking down the overall meta in the coming days and weeks for various different niches and play styles. So stay tuned for all of that alongside everything else going on in COD by hitting that subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like on your way out. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.